Good evening. I'm delighted to welcome you to this evening's conversation. We are hosting this conversation because education is a basic human right that works to raise people out of poverty, level inequalities, and ensure sustainable development. For social, economic, and cultural reasons, this right was denied to Black Americans. The education of Black people was seen as a threat. It was seen as the defiant act of creating a community and undermining the false racist notion that slavery was justified by the inferiority and inhumanity of people of African descent. Unfortunately, the ghosts of these anti-literacy laws are still here. They remain with us. Tonight, our conversation will explore this fundamental right, the right to read. And we felt it was the perfect conversation to have on Juneteenth, as we are proclaiming loudly that we know our rights. As Juneteenth is a celebration of independence and the right to be free, we are celebrating this day by exploring one of our most pressing civil rights issue, the right to read. The ability to read, advocate, and self-govern is fundamental to freedom. We know that every child deserves this right. And it's with that I welcome you to our conversation. But first, I would like to thank our sponsors. We are so delighted to have many sponsors that are shown here to support our work. Particularly, we're delighted to have WKKF, whose mission is to support children and families as they strengthen and create the conditions to achieve success. Children are at the heart of their work. And we're delighted to have the Bar Foundation of Boston support this foundational work. With that, I would like to welcome Dr. Kareem Weaver. Dr. Weaver is a co-founder and executive director of FULCRUM and is Oakland's NAACP's second vice president and chair of its education committee. Kareem's advocacy is featured in the film The Right to Read. Mr. Weaver, Dr. Weaver, I apologize, previously served as New Leaders Executive Director of the Western Region and was an award-winning teacher and administrator. He has an undergraduate degree from Morehouse College and a master's from the University of South Carolina. Mr. Weaver believes in the potential of not just some students, but all his students. And that's why we love him. The brotherhood of man and the importance of service beyond self. Thank you so much for being with us this evening.
It's a pleasure to be here, and you said that's why we love having him here. Well, you may want to hold off because I'm gonna be honest with you tonight. So,
We're
so
ready for
I
it.
hope you don't mind. Don't mind
No,
that.
we're ready for it. We are ready for our
Right,
honest conversation on Juneteenth.
right,
So,
fantastic.
you know, it is unbelievable that a film had to come out to proclaim this right, the right to read. And as I thought about it and peeled it back, there have been so many forces that have denied us this right. So I would like to start with what inspired you to take up this issue? What
Uh,
changed the wind for you?
for me, it was a matter of doing a root cause analysis because I was just tired of chasing the tail. I mean, our kids are struggling all across the board, but when you sit down and you map it out and you find out, why is that? Why is that? Why is that? You keep going back to the root cause of things across a host of domains, whether it's employment, whether it's health, just all kind of sociological issues. It comes to the fact that our kids can't read. So for me, you mentioned awards and all that. That's fine. I loved every minute of being an educator, even if it was tough. But at a certain point in time, I'm not chasing glass trophies. And I have a bookshelf full of stuff that means nothing. At the end of the day, our kids can't read. And
Yeah.
so for me, it was just a matter of sitting back and really identifying what the root cause is of some of the challenges that we're facing.
So you said that's the root cause. So if our kids aren't reading, what's happening in school? I mean, that's why we're sending our kids to school, right? To learn how to read.
Well, that's a big question. What's happening in school? I think the question really is what's not happening in schools.
Ooh.
We are, metaphorically speaking, asking our teachers to make bricks without straw. They don't even
Mm,
have the materials they need to do what needs to be done. And our universities aren't stepping up. Like, that's a whole other conversation we can have. But teachers are right now doing the best they can to piece things together because what they've been given just doesn't work, from the training to the materials to the professional development. And so, we ask schools to do a couple of things. One, keep the kids safe. I don't want a phone call about some emergency, keep them safe. And secondly, they got to be able to read. And
mm,
so what we have right now is a loose confederation of districts that are basically, each one does what they want to do. And unfortunately, this hasn't been on the front burner, and the public hasn't made it a front burner issue. You have some people, you know, yelling in the woods, I'd say, but nobody's really listening to them. You have folks from all across the political spectrum. This isn't a political thing. I mean, we have some people who are more activists. We have some, AFT, the teachers union, everybody's, Marva Collins is saying the same thing. People have been saying this for years, but we've just been so distracted by all these other things that literacy just hasn't risen to the top of the heap. In fact, on Juneteenth, I think it's appropriate to point out, Maya Angelou years ago, she said that the elimination of illiteracy is as important to our history as the end of slavery.
mm. Say
And
that again.
yeah, the elimination of illiteracy is important to our history as the end of slavery. That has stuck with me. She said that in 1995 to Mother Jones magazine. They were interviewing her, and when she said that, it hit me. Yeah, knowing full well the impact, the generational impact and trauma that slavery caused. And she said, "This is just as important." And I've been thinking about that and weighing it, and then looking around at the systems that we have in place and the structures, and it just doesn't add up. We're just not. We haven't elevated it to importance, to the level of importance that needs to be there. So that's why, for me, this is a calling all interested parties type thing. This is an all hands on deck type call. It's a clarion call. We have to find out who's willing to make our kids a priority and who's willing to put action behind it. Now, from wherever they sit, it could be from a policy lens, it could be from an instructional lens, it could be from a philanthropic lens, it could be wherever a person sits. There's room for everybody, because when you have outcomes the way they're sitting right now in terms of literacy, no one, and I mean no one, is unaffected by this. This hits everybody. And that's just, so we talk about Massachusetts, but it's nationwide. But Massachusetts specifically, when you have, when you're looking at 40 something percent of kids reading proficiently on the NAEP, the National Assessment of Educational Progress, that means 6 out of 10 aren't reading. And it gets even lower for other groups. The variety of groups that we have. So it's just not something that's sustainable. We can't sustain it as a society, as a state, as a city. At some point, um, at some point, these economic systems, these social systems, these political systems, at some point, they can't be maintained if you don't have a literate population. So that's why this has risen to the top.
You said so many things here. Massachusetts prides itself that it's number one in the nation in education.
Mm-hmm.
When you say 47%, that's not just Black children, that's all children. Is that
That's
correct?
right. That's absolutely correct. So I was at a conference recently, and they have an achievement gap, and in this state, they had 60%, I think, of white children reading proficiently. And so they asked me, well, what about the gap? And what about the Black kids? And what about I said, wait, hold on, hold on, hold on, hold on. Wait a second, time out, time out. So answer me this. You have 5 kids, 2 of them can't read. Are you okay with that? I just want to know, because if the answer to that is yes, then we can start talking about a gap. But if the answer to that is no, then I got news for you. You got a crisis on your hand too. And by the way, in Massachusetts, it's not 60%. White kids reading about 55% proficient, and that's after we can talk about the economics that goes into that as well, as people get tutoring and different things, and coming from the public institutions that we um, empower to serve our students. the numbers much, much less than that, and then those with the resources supplement. That can't be the system. The system has to mean that when we go through these institutions, that's the universities, that's the high schools, that's the middle schools, elementary schools, and preschools, that those systems are arranged and organized in a way that's going to get the outcomes that we, the public, say are important to us. The question is literacy important to us? Now
Hmm.
I was talking about whites, but you could go any ethnic group, Black folks. I mean, like I said, this is Juneteenth. We definitely have, you know, it's such an issue that it makes one wonder, what else are we focusing on? What could
What
when your
could
kids can't
possibly be
read,
more
what
important?
what else is there? They can't listen. I understand, I understand the Celtics just won the championship. I understand that the Patriots training camp is going on. I understand all of that. I understand the Reds. I get it. I get it. Our children cannot read. They cannot read. And at some point, we have to step back and really introspect and ask ourselves, what are our priorities?
That's right. That's right. You've told us or given us such a interesting picture of where we are today. I'm curious to know, how did we get here? What happened?
That's a good question. So, and I really don't even go into this too much, but since you asked, you pointed out the anti-literacy laws.
Hmm.
That all started in 1830, Nat Turner's rebellion.
Actually,
And
sooner.
when Nat Turner's group went through and did what they did, the country said, we will never let this happen again. We're going to have laws on the books, and all around the country, these anti-literacy laws cropped up. So if you caught teaching a Black person to read, it's a $500 fine. You might get thrown in. And you got to remember, this 1830 money. So 1830 money, $500 is some significant money. So all these laws cropped up, and it became illegal to teach enslaved persons how to read, writ large. And I'm not talking just in this, I'm talking about, everywhere. So it came out of fear. The fear of an educated Black population is what prompted these literacy laws. The question is, what are we still scared of? What is it? What's driving it now? Because the fear is still on the books, and it's not just the laws that we have, but it's the policies we don't have. If you look, matter of fact, if your team will help me by putting this in the chat, if you look at the policy map for early literacy laws, policies, and implementation around the country, and you look at where Massachusetts is, I mean, it's something that, like, it makes you, when you compare it to some states where they've got, I think North Carolina has 18 out of the 18 of these policies recommended to support kids reading, right? Implementation and practice. Then you go to Massachusetts, and it just shouldn't be that hard.
Hmm.
It just shouldn't be that hard. We barely have any. We barely have any. Now, that doesn't mean that teaching and learning. It doesn't mean that people still can't hit the ground and teach their tail off, because it happens every day all across the state. But what it means is we're asking people to fight an uphill battle. And like I said earlier, making bricks without straw. So it's first started with those anti-literacy laws and fear. And we codified that into law, policy, and legislation. And then you have, I remember George Bush one time, he was a governor, and he went before the NAACP in Texas, and he said, we have to be careful of the soft bigotry of low expectations. And I don't know if it's really soft or not, but what do we expect from our children is the real question. So really what this does is it lays bare what we believe is possible for our kids. We can talk all the talk. You can talk about diversity, equity, inclusion till the cows come home. But what do we expect from our children? And how does that show up policy-wise? How does it show up in the curriculum that we have? How does it show up in how we structure contracts? How does it show up, how we pay our teachers? How does it show up in a preschool? How does it show up? You can't have um, a policy situation like we have here in Massachusetts, but everybody's talking a good game. Like we all love the babies. Love is functional. It's functional. It's what we do. We only have 7 of the 18, and of those 7, 6 are partially implemented, and 1 is for the future. So we don't have any of those policies right now. This is the state house. This is the state house because there's room on this train for everybody. Everyone has some responsibility here. Everyone. So we got here because of fear. We got here because for whatever reason, we don't seem to value other people's children. And oftentimes we don't prioritize our own children. And the fact of the matter is, universities, and I know I might step on some toes here, but I warned you when we first started. I warned you but universities around the country, not just Massachusetts, bought into methods that are not aligned with the research consensus and the brain science. And they've been pushing it for years. And nobody's been willing to push back. We don't want to upset them. We don't want to, they've got the cachet of being an elite institution. But nobody said, wait a second, you're teaching our teachers how to prepare students to read by guessing words. That's the plan. The science does not say that that's the way we should go. This is not a psycholinguistic guessing game. This is a science, and we can teach children to crack the code and attend to the science. As a matter of fact, if your team has that policy, um, I think there's something from National Council on Teacher Quality, NCTQ,
That's what it is.
where it shows the graduate school or the universities in the state and how they rate in terms of the reading foundations, how they prepare. It should be all A's. Massachusetts, it should be all A's. I don't get me wrong, I love going to the sports things and all that, but our universities, you cannot hide behind your brand or your endowment. How are you preparing our teachers to reach our babies? And if you're not, you should be accountable to the people whose taxes, especially for the public institutions, whose taxes actually are paying your way.
Hmm.
And for the private institutions, I understand, they can march to their own drum. I get it, but unless they are producing educators with stickers on our cheeks that say, use only if your child already knows how to read. Unless that's the case, no. Every educator is going to these schools expected to get a good education that prepares them for the job at hand. And right now, that's not the case. They spend their money in graduate school, then they end up having to spend their own money to actually learn how to teach a kid how to read. That's just so we got there because this confluence of all these forces together and the fact that we're distracted with everything and everybody else that allowed this to grow into the situation where it is now.
I'm glad that you're making this concrete. We have a lot of people, we have people from all over, but I'm glad that you're focusing on Massachusetts and making this concrete. And we want to stay in this kind of concrete space. So, your organization, Fulcrum, is
Mhm.
looking to have impact. And I believe Fulcrum is an acronym. What does it stand for and how did you start it?
Well, let me just say, so our co-founder, it didn't start off being Fulcrum. It was FCLN, which stood for Full and Complete Literacy Now. That was what I came up with. Full and complete. And my co-founder, she's like, Kareem, you can't have something that says fuckling. That
Oh, no, no,
that's
no.
not
We
that
can't do
that
that.
yeah that she's like, I understand you're good at a lot of things. You're a
That's
great
not the right
educator, she said, but
acronym.
you need to just step back and let me handle this. I was like, all right. I was like, that's what it is. Full and
That's
complete
right.
literacy now. I was like, I don't care what it said. That they got to get that. She's like, I understand that,
But
but
that's
we're gonna
not the
move it. We're gonna
acronym
pivot.
we
Yeah, we're gonna pivot. So she came up with Fulcrum, which is full and complete reading is a universal mandate. I was
mm,
like, okay, all right, okay, all right.
we can live with
I
that.
can, yeah, I can work with it. Not the same, but I can work with it. And really, what that acronym is supposed to point to is one is the urgency. This is not something. I mean, I've seen a lot of strategic plans, and we're going to have incremental growth, and we're going to do this and do that, and you know, our kids are only young once. They're only in first grade one time. They're only in 10th grade one time. And so when now We need it now. It's a universal mandate. This is not a niche thing where it's just the bilingual people or the black folks or the white folks. This is a universal. Everybody wants their children to read.
Mhm.
And so at Fulcrum, we've just made that our priority. So we work with universities, we work with state departments, we work
Mhm.
with school districts, we kick publishers in the knees when we have to. We do on the ground coaching in some school systems. We don't bully our way in. We don't, at least not publicly. You know, we throw elbows when we need to. But
Right.
the thing is that we're largely funded by philanthropy. And the reason that is because there have been districts who have said, "Hey, listen, we'd like to do this, this, that, and the other with you." There was two things that I had to be careful of. One, um, the old saying says, "All money ain't good money." So
Mm-mm.
when people, and I would tell them, "Well, look, just because you're paying us, we're going to be honest with you, and there are going to be some things that we need to tell you and show you that you're not going to like. You're just not going to like it." But whether it is your program or your policies, and we have to maintain that. And it has been tough because you know we've had some partnerships where we've had the conversations that nobody else wants to have.
Mm.
Nobody wants to bite the hand that feeds them. So
Speak
Fulcrum is an on-the-ground nonprofit trying to make sure that students get their access to the right to read.
so speaking of that, you've said something that's a little different. I would
Mhm.
say, I wouldn't say controversial, but often we say it's the parent's fault or the child is unteachable. And you've mentioned parents a couple of times. Is this an issue of parenting, bad parenting, or is it bigger than that? Like, how do parents fare into this conference, or how do parents come out looking better? Because we have blamed parents for a very long time. You didn't prepare your child. You're not giving your child the resources. How do parents fit into this equation?
So I'm glad you asked this question. It's a sensitive topic, but if we're going to be real about it, we have to go there. So, um, yes, parents do have a role in this. And I said there's plenty of blame to go around for everybody. I meant that. Now, I don't blame parents necessarily because of a whole host of reasons, which I'll name in a minute. But I'll use myself as an example. I was a teacher's teacher, right? I loved teaching. I was good at it. I taught children, and I taught my own children to read. I taught them. I had them do preschool twice or kindergarten twice. Once in the private preschool that also had a kindergarten. And then when they went to the public system, I had them do kindergarten again, just to make sure everything was fine. And then I did what a lot of parents do. I went to work. I mean, I had been working the whole time, but I started to focus. Like, okay, you good now, right? You can read. You straight. You got
You're
two
in school,
parents. Yeah, right. You're in school, right? Now I'm dropping you off in great
drop
shape.
you.
Right. And what I didn't realize was that you can never take your eyes off your children. Never. Not and I'm talking about the education. What was happening in the school actually made her go backwards. They actually, and this is a very common approach to teaching reading, is balanced literacy, the whole language, all that stuff. It actually, by the time she got to eighth grade, she was in the bathroom eating lunch by herself. She hated school. She hated school. And her reading was. And I thought, and parents, if there are any parents here, I hope you hear this. My hindsight is your foresight. I thought because of who I am and how I parent, I thought it was just a matter of effort. So you mean to tell me that your sister and brother doing great in school, two parents who are educators, I've done everything, and your work's not turned in, or your grades are this? It was a problem, okay? And come to find out, she had dyslexia, has dyslexia,
Mhm.
and I didn't know.
Mhm.
Now, I mention this because dyslexia, it's a neurological processing difference. A lot of our kids have it, but Black children usually are not diagnosed with dyslexia because we have a wait to fail model. They call it what is the name of it? It'll come to me. But you have to have a 2 year gap in
Two
what you
years,
perform. 2
2
year
years.
gap, right?
How,
In
we
turn,
we talk about the learning loss of a summer.
uh,
You're
uh,
telling me?
to be
2
official. But see, it's not a problem. It's not officially, systemically a problem. You come back from the summer, you forgot everything you learned, and you're 1 year behind. That's not a problem to the institution, oftentimes. So we have this model across the country where the discrepancy model is what it's called, where there has to be a 2 year gap before the alarm bells go off, before we start referring you for testing and this and that. And a lot of districts don't want to test anyway because it costs money. Because if you go to special ed, it costs 4 times as much money.
Mhm.
So, so understand that model, the gap between where you're performing and where you're expected to perform is rooted in expectations. If you don't expect anything from a child, then there's officially no problem. So there's another layer of this, which is what do we expect for our children? Do we really think Black children can exceed? Can they excel? Can they go above and beyond? And if that's not the case, then there really officially is no problem. So the question is, who dares believe in the potential of our children? Who? Who? What organizations? What communities? What staff? What district leadership? What policymakers? Who? Because you can go along just fine, and this won't even be on your radar because people really don't expect much from certain groups of children.
Mhm.
And that even goes for white kids. Like I said before, you're talking about, you know, 50 something percent of white kids in Massachusetts are reading. Okay, well, we're good, right? 50%. Is that what we expect? What do you expect of our children? I believe, this is Kareem talking. I believe Black children are brilliant. I believe they have the potential to do anything that they set their mind to if we put them in a position to be successful. That's me. I can't speak for everybody else, but my experience has borne that out. As a teacher, as a principal, as a community activist, I've seen it. When I took over a school, the last school I led, they were the lowest in the district. Them same kids a couple of years later, thriving, thriving. When I was a school teacher, when I was a school teacher, you're not going to be happy with this. I had a 4-5 combination class, and my last 10 years of teaching was a bilingual class, which just means you could put anybody in my rooms. I had Black kids. Basically, if they didn't know what to do with you, they put you in my room. That was the official, unofficial designation, right? Bilingual, anybody. I'm the Black guy, give them all the kids that nobody wants to deal with. So I was teaching the way the research shows you're supposed to teach, the way Marva Collins said, this is what you do. I got a letter one day that said, and I'll never forget it. The scores on the latest district benchmark assessment do not align with the district's expectations for students from this demographic. Let me translate that for you. If y'all probably know what that means. It's no way these poor Black and brown kids can be doing that. There's no
Achievement.
way. You must be, they
You're
must
cheating.
be cheating. Yeah, I took that thing, I stapled it to the bulletin board. I wanted to lay bare their expectations.
That's
I
right.
had to lay it bare. Now they ended up apologizing. I was teacher of the year a couple times, like they, But I guess somebody in central office hadn't got the memo. Yeah, they get down in that classroom. They ain't got that memo. But the reality is, many people in power and authority don't have any expectations for our children to be successful, and it comes out. It comes out in their actions, and their words, and their policies, and their budgets, in their curricular choices. You got districts all across the state who choose curriculum that has no evidence of improving student achievement. Zero. None. None. In fact, I've talked with publishers, and the publishers say, Kareem, you're asking us to provide evidence of student achievement. Those randomly controlled trials cost millions. Millions. Why would we do that when no one ever asks us for those things? We would be wasting millions of dollars. And I quote, we have a fiduciary responsibility to our shareholders. I mean, in other words, they don't care about results for kids. They're on some other stuff.
Hmm.
As long as we give them their DEI, as long as we give them a few brown faces in the books, as long as we say all the popular things, does it work or not really doesn't rise to the level of importance that you're talking about. So what I'm asking everybody to consider is, how can we lean on these institutions and organizations and districts to say, we want you to make this the main thing. This is our priority. You are a public institution, and this is in the public's, this is a public mandate. You got to do it. Make this a priority in your curriculum, your calendar, your schedule, uh, your budget. Um, Lean on these universities and tell them, we're not going to, if you don't tighten up and line up with the science and the research consensus and prepare your folks so that they can be successful for kids' sake, then we're not going to hire your people. You have to lean on these institutions. Otherwise, they have proven that they really don't care enough to do things on their own that's in the best interest of our kids. I hate to just lay it like that, but it is what it is. We have to just call it what, we at some point we have to just be honest about the situation. Our kids need help, and we're either going to help them or not. And there are ways to do it, but we have to be more interested in our kids than we are our associations, our
Mm,
connections to these institutions of power.
mm.
That's why I said we don't go to the university and say, hey, can you cut a check? Nah, because we're going to check you when you're wrong. We're gonna call it out. And so you can get mad if you want to, but it's the truth. And so, but we all have to get to the point where we've just had enough, and we're going to prioritize our kids over everything else.
We've talked a lot about the deficits, what's wrong, and from many different points of view, whether it's the parents, whether it's the institution, even teachers. The mission of our organization is to focus on the assets of our community rather than the deficits. So can you share with us what's working? Where is it working? And then how is it working? Like, who's doing something that we can look at and
Yeah,
possibly see, hey, this is a pathway to getting this right?
yeah. Okay. Love this question. What's the positive? Where is it working? So there is a podcast. It's called by Ed Trust. It's called Ordinary Districts with Extraordinary Results, or something like that. And they were on for 5 seasons or so, and they would go around the country and they would just look to see what works. What
Mm.
districts are actually moving the needle in terms of reading, and figures urban, rural, suburban, all they just all across country. 5 seasons. I would go to that website and listen, and I would look, and these episodes would have 5 views, 30 views. Yeah. 70 views. I'm talking about they walked you through it step by step, what they did. The superintendent, the school board, the teachers, the principals, the parents, everybody, local universities, 5 views. After 5 or 6 years, now, let it have been a football game. Let it have been, Jalen Brown is dominating the Mavericks during the finals, and the Celtics. Listen,
Or Rihanna's hair.
billions of, you're right.
Rihanna's hair.
Oh goodness, yeah.
That's what's
But
up.
for whatever reason, we just haven't focused on what works. So when we bring
Let's
someone on at Fulcrum, the first thing we do is have them go through that website, and then we comb through the data, and we find examples of folks that are getting it done, and we study them. In fact, um, last February, so a few months ago, we took about 40 people to Seaford, Delaware, where it's phenomenal. Their situation was so bad that they were going to be taken over by the state. It was just, kids weren't learning. It was just not a good situation. And they had, there's a lot of poverty. The industry moved out of town. They had a lot of second language learners, both Spanish and French, because a lot of kids who look like me, but they come from Haiti, so they speak French, Creole as well. So it just was bad, and they didn't know what to do, and they got desperate enough to actually start following the science and the research consensus. They got
So
they
talk to
got
me about
desperate enough.
what does that mean to follow the science of reading?
Yeah.
We hear
So
it, but what
yeah,
is
yeah, yeah. I got you. So what that means is, um, they looked at their curriculum and they said, this, we can't have kids guess words anymore. We got to stop. We actually have to teach them how to read step by step, go directly, not inferentially, systematically, directly, explicitly, step by step, and teach them how to read. What
what
a
does that
plan.
mean?
It
Teach them.
means that, I'll tell you exactly what it means. It means that, let's say there are 15 units in a book. I'm just making up. Let's say there's 15 units. Well, we're going to go unit 1 first, unit 2 second, unit 3 third. What we do now in many school districts, like in Oakland, this is one of the reasons why they thought I was cheating. You know, February is Black History Month, so we're going to do unit 13 then, and then unit 5 is Hispanic Heritage. We're gonna match it to the pilot. To look, my brilliant strategy was to just go in order. I'm doing unit 1 first because it's unit 1, and we start with, it's like a staircase. We're not gonna skip steps. We're going one. You would think, the old folks called this common sense. That's what they used to call it, but just step by step, one thing at a time, building our skills, building our capacity, growing, making complex text, keeping it rigorous, and just teaching. That apparently is a new thing for many districts. They don't do that. So in Seaford, they were like, no, we're going to stop playing hopscotch. We're going to go in order. We're going to find something that has evidence of working. They got the curriculum. Now, here's the key. 2 things. It has the most evidence of student achievement results or improvement of any district in the country, bar none, according to independent, third-party, randomly controlled trials. So they did that. And then they found something that aligned to their teacher contract. So in Oakland, and that's my home. I love Oakland. We're working really well with them. But in Oakland, teachers get 100 minutes a week to prepare. 100 minutes a week, but for everything, not just for math, but English, but for everything, science, reading, 100 minutes.
100 minutes a week?
A week, yeah, right. So we're going to give
2
you
hours,
100
less than
minutes.
2 hours.
Yes, yes. Listen, if I'm lying, I'm dying. 100 minutes a week. That's what you get by the contract, right? So we're not talking about hope. Hope is not a strategy. I'm talking about the contract. 100 minutes a week. Now, then we went out and we picked a curriculum for reading. When they did a pilot program, they did a survey, they said, how much do you need to prepare for this? The people who were part of that pilot, they said 2 hours a day. I can get ready for full implementation at 2 hours a day.
120 minutes a day.
A day. A day.
Versus
And
100.
and I went crazy. I went ballistic. They got so tired of me. I had already gotten them to, not just me, we had already encouraged them to come down off of some stuff that wasn't aligned with the science. That guessing word stuff, they threw that out. So then, but just because it is aligned to the science doesn't mean that the folks are going to be able to use it. So you're expecting people to take all these materials home and do it. Now, some people might do that, sure, but that's not a systemic approach to it. We
Right.
want teachers to be ready when they show up in class. And I got news for you. The kids who are the furthest from opportunity, the kids who look like me, it's going to take all the planning you can get to get them where they got to go. Because you have to be intentional about things, right? So they picked something not because they picked it because it was what's the word for it? It was an advocacy curriculum. It was social justice minded. It was activist. It was an activist curriculum. I mean, it's good. If you got 2 hours a day, go ahead. I mean, and it has some results. So I'm not saying it doesn't work. So we had to back off because the stuff they had before was so bad that we was like, and the teachers union and the district agreed on it. And so, they don't really agree on too much. So that was a win. So we had to take the win. However, I told them, I was like, look, do we want all our kids to read or not?
Right.
Let's stop guessing at this thing. I understand that it's activist. So for example, instead of weather patterns, it's climate change. Everything is through an activist lens. Now, that's fine, right? But that can't be the main consideration. The
Right.
main consideration is it going to teach our kids to read? Because understand, we can go to the library and read anything we want to. We can go read about climate change and Cesar Chavez and Harriet Tubman and World War II and anything. It's the library. But if you can't read, you're shut out of all of that.
Right.
And so we have to put our children's needs first as a
Right.
priority. And oftentimes around the country, that just doesn't happen. You've got to pick something like Seaford, where they said, we're going to do something where our teachers can do it. It's got evidence of results. We're going to manage it. We're going to give people professional development. We'll start with a small group, then make it a little bigger, then make it a little bigger. I mean, there's a way that they did it, and we've studied them. So we took 40 people from around the country to go see it. Man, it was so powerful. It was so powerful. We had board members and superintendents and funders, like whoever, just school folks, Department of Education from different states, New Mexico, Missouri, California, Georgia, just all over, New York. And they were just blown away because what I've come to realize is as much talk as people, a lot of people talk a good game. Most people have never actually seen it work.
Speaking of work, one of the places that you've been and was mentioned in the film is Mississippi. The state of Mississippi took this on. So, we're in the state of Massachusetts. We already said science of reading is important. We have
Mm-hmm.
districts that are supposedly held accountable to do this. Some schools are actually doing it. But
Mm-hmm.
something happened in that Mississippi miracle.
Yeah.
Something happened that I would like you to kind of share with us. Was it, I don't know, was it the Secretary of Education? Was it the school district? Was it philanthropy? What were the magic ingredients that helped create that miracle?
Well, first of all, if you don't mind, I would ask your team because I talked a little bit about Seaford, but I
Yeah.
gave them a couple of links. One is
Oh,
a short
okay. We
form.
will put
It's
that
a
in.
short form, like 6 minutes, and a Q&A, and they could
Right.
see that. And then a long form, an hour-long thing, if you have a mind for it, and it would just a Q&A. We just go through all what happened. So if you don't mind
Okay. We
putting
will
those in
put
the
that
chat,
in
and
the
people can use,
we will.
that'd be helpful. As far as Mississippi,
Because we always
um,
hear about the Mississippi miracle.
right. So
And
first of all, and let me just tell you, it wasn't a miracle. There was nothing miraculous about it. The regular kids and just adults that made up their mind they were going to do right, and they did it step by step. So the first step, so we leadership matters.
mhm.
They had leaders in place who decided that they were going to make some changes.
And when you say leader,
Philanthropic leaders
who
at the state level, Department of Education, the Mississippi Department of Education, Dr. Carrie Wright, who's now in Maryland, and her team, Dr. Kimiana Burke, and others, they said, this is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to move. And they crafted a plan, a framework, a literacy plan. And they went about it because it wasn't an overnight thing. You're talking about 10 or 11 years it took them to get it where it is now, and they're still going forward on it. But it's not a snap. So just to be
and I'm
clear, it's not a
glad you
step.
said that. It took how long? 10
10
to
years.
11 years.
10 years. So like I said, it wasn't a miracle. 10 years of hard work. This is not easy, right? People have to unlearn some things that we've been taught back at the university because it's now a habit. It's canon. There are some assumptions that there are some things that we do in education that just aren't aligned to the research and the brain science. So we got to unlearn it. That's tough. That's hard work. Change management is tough, and it takes money. So they had the Barksdale Institute. I would be remiss if I didn't mention. So they came in with big money, and they said, we want to put money behind this. We're going to make this a priority, and they funded a lot of it. So
The
philanthropy came in and
foundation.
said, yeah, but the institute. But yeah, so I think it was, um, yeah, Barksdale folks. They funded it, and he's one of the wealthier people in the country, and just said this is a priority. He had his own personal reasons why literacy was a priority. Every foundation's got to decide what's important to them. Everybody's
Mm,
got a strategic plan. Everybody's got we got 5 different areas of interest, but what's your priority? What are you really about? And Barksdale was like, this is, I'm dropping my bucket right here. Literacy. We're going to fund this thing. So professional development, they partner with the state. Indiana's the same way. Their Department of Ed partnered with the Lilly Foundation. They put $100 million in it, and they're off and running. It's going to take some time, but they're starting the process. But in Mississippi, they funded literacy coaches. They funded professional development, and they actually went around the universities. Oh, that this is a they basically said this is a state priority,
mm,
and we need the university's partnership. We need you, but we can't wait. Our
mm.
kids, our our kids are withering on the vine today, and so they went around them. So their coaches, I said literacy coaches, they're not through the universities, they're not through the district, they're through the state. The state said, this is how we're going to move. And they started with the professional development. They started with these literacy coaches. They said, we're going to apply this science of reading. We're going to go step by step.
What was the
And people
role
bought in. What's
and
the
how
run of
the role of the union, and how did the union buy into this?
so every place is different. Every place is different.
Let's go
Some
with
places some places don't even have strong literacy union presence. But let me say this: Massachusetts is lucky. And I know it's not all about Massachusetts tonight, but you guys are lucky because you have you know uh, AFT affiliates in Massachusetts that are pretty strong. I've had a chance to engage them briefly at different conferences and stuff, and I went to the AFT Teach conference. And here I am at the AFT Teach conference, where their president, Randy Weingarten, gets on stage and says that we've been doing science of reading for 30 years. For decades. She's right. See, you go on their website right now, and they'll say the elements of an effective reading program. They list. It's just, we just love to argue about everything else. Now, I'm not saying people have to agree with them on everything, whatever floats your boat. But when they're right, they're right.
right.
But nobody has been listening to them about instruction, and not the universities, not the districts, nobody. So unions can play a huge role in this. Where the unions, in fact, in Delaware, when I was talking about Seaver, Delaware, in that Q&A, we almost all passed out at one point because they said, yeah, the teachers union, it used to be a very contentious relationship between the district and the teachers union. But as things started to get better and they started to work together and address some of these issues around usability and planning time and just all the things we've been talking about, they said they had a union meeting and they had to cancel. They were like, we don't really have too much to talk about. So meeting is adjourned. We'll have a second. Because newsflash, teachers teachers want kids to read, and your working conditions are tied to this. You think so? People think we have a behavior issue in public school. We got a reading crisis. You think we have a suspension issue, a crisis? There's a reason why those kids are flipping chairs. They can't read.
Right.
We think we have an attendance issue. Well, do you really want to show up when you're 15 and sit next to this cute kid next to you, this little girl next to you, and you can't read and you don't want to get embarrassed by getting called on?
Mm.
Or our budget crisis. We're spending 4x, 4 times the amount in special ed. There's so many things that are tied up in this that when you start to unravel it, when you start to actually deal with the root cause, a lot of the issues that become toxic and contentious, they just like, yeah, not that big a deal. We're gonna work on that, but it's not that big a deal. Literacy is a root cause issue of a lot of challenges, but our unions have a role to play because one, their contract has a big impact on this.
Right.
I hope I talk with union leaders around the country, usually the district level, a couple of states, but usually district level. And I urge them, while you're arguing about salary, go get your money, fine. While you're arguing about all these other things, put preparation time on there. Make
Right.
sure that your folks have the time to do the job that they want to do for kids. I know there's so many other fights to fight, but put that prep time on there. And the other thing is for unions, and I can't emphasize this strong enough. When these districts go to pick a curriculum, and let's just say elementary school, usually they have a committee, and on that committee they ask for volunteers. Well, who wants to join the committee? Well, who do you think is going to raise their hand? Your veteran teachers, people who have figured it all out. The class is running like a finely oiled machine, and so I could spend a couple hours here and there. I can, but guess what? The most vulnerable children are usually served by inexperienced teachers.
Mm.
So maybe, just maybe, we ought to have a couple of early career teachers on that selection committee too to see if this thing they're picking works for them. See,
Mm.
there's so many. So at Fulcrum, one of the things we do is we walk people through this. The same people who talk equity and inclusion on Monday, Tuesday, on Wednesday, we're like, no, look, we're going to operationalize this thing. Don't tell me about equity and inclusion when you're excluding the very teacher who is serving the most vulnerable kids. And then you adopt it and you have this rollout, this strategic plan, but they were never considered,
Mm.
both in from the publishers, from your committee,
Mhm.
from your contract, and everything in between. And you may not like us, but you don't. I'm gonna tell it like it is. And there are kids out there, like Maya Angelou said, this is just as important as elimination of slavery. We have to make this a priority.
This is another form of slavery of the mind. And, we have a couple of questions in the chat, and I know we're running out of time, and this conversation is, but Kareem, we could be here another hour.
Yeah, yeah. I'm
Not just
sorry.
unpacking, but how do we get to where we need to go? So, one question is, how do we bridge the gap between the knowledge of literacy challenges and resources and cultural acceptance? But in that bridge, what's on that bridge? You've talked about a lot of things: teacher education, teacher preparation time, the unions, the science, everyone understanding the science of reading. But how do we put that together? How do we start marching down that road in a way that's comprehensive, that we can actually get to where we need to be? Where do we start?
You need a few things. First of all, big picture, you need a coalition. You need some folks who can talk to people from different groups and make this a priority and have them rally around a common goal. Okay. And when I say different groups, I mean different groups. You may
The
not agree
unions and the
culturally.
teachers
Yeah,
and the
yeah,
parents.
everybody. It might be a political, it may be religious, whatever. The people, we know we're very diverse. Okay. If diversity really matters, then we need a diverse group of advocates advocating for literacy outcomes for kids. So that's the first thing. And then they can make demands on the district and at the state level. You don't want to just go with one group. You want to go as a coalition, if at all possible.
Hmm.
But if not possible, go by your doggone self. By all means, we got to go get our babies. The second thing is um, we have to look at policy. What are the policies? For any lawmakers here who will see this, you, you can't have a situation like California and Massachusetts, these places that are dear to my heart, but just don't have policies in place that support early literacy. That has to change. We have to make sure that teachers have the materials that they need. That means that curriculum's got to be right. School districts often say, Weaver, we adopt curriculum on a 5-year cycle. This is common because it's very expensive. So every 5 or 6 years, we'll go through this process. Our kids can't wait 5 or 6 years. If the curriculum is trash, then go raise the money to get a new one. If you can't afford it, like I'll donate for that. We want curriculum that works for our kids. Okay, sign me up. Don't keep using trash because you can't afford the right things. You're gonna keep doing the wrong thing. It's backwards thing. So those are the type of things that we can do: policy, community advocacy, coalition minded, and then people stepping up to bridge the gap when need to be. And universities, you have to make up your mind as a community that there are no sacred cows when it comes to this stuff. And so if I got to push a university, I don't care how famous they are. I don't care what their brand or endowment is, with their Carnegie level one. I don't. Are you getting our teachers ready for our babies? That's got to be the North Star. Um, I would say those things: curriculum, universities, policy, and that's a lot right there. But
Right.
but you also need people who are willing to carry the torch.
And
I
speaking,
was Yeah, you need
where
some
do
folks.
parents
Whether
come? Another question is, if parents believe in their children's achievement,
Mhm.
setting high expectations, celebrating great books, going to the library, reading to their child, all the things
Wonderful.
that you did, right?
Yeah.
Achieving a higher rate of literacy, is that possible? Does this matter? And does that override the deficit in their school?
Okay. Yes, it does matter. Giving a kid a good foundation is always good. Right? Oral language development. You go to the grocery store, name the stuff, talk to kids, ask questions, let them talk. Demand that they talk in complete sentences. That's one of the biggest things you can do. So yes, it matters. You have a lot of agency as a parent in terms of how kids develop, and it matters. But we also have a right to expect our public institutions to serve our kids.
Hmm.
And even if you don't have the luxury of having a two-parent home with two educators, like you know, what if my child didn't have two former teachers who were parents, didn't have teacher, who didn't, what, she would have just circled a drain. So those things matter, absolutely. And parents can get involved, support your kids, but also we have to make sure the system is right, that the system is serving the greatest number of kids possible to get them where they need to go. But yeah, all that helps. Now, I will give you one quick warning. Part of the reason, oh, so pernicious. So my daughter was taught to read. So when she went to school, the 2-year gap didn't show up for a long time. You understand? Because we were, she
Did
was
all the right
almost,
things.
yes, she was almost punished for having this parental involvement. She could read, so there's no problem. And so it took them a long time, a long time. They didn't believe they had an issue. And a layer on top of that, the expectations for Black children and for Black girls, especially. Now, if she had been a boy, let's say she had been a more aggressive child and she started flipping chairs or something, they'd have had to deal with her. But no, she's quiet, easygoing, she's nice. Everybody loves Margot. And she can read. There's no problem. It's pernicious. We have a right to expect excellence from our children. They shouldn't be punished because of parental involvement. The expectations have to match their excellence. And so, with that being said, that's why it's important to have it be systematic. When we talk about the science, it's systematic. I'm not I'm not assessing you because I suspect there's a deficit. I'm not assessing you because I perceive there's some learning. No. I'm assessing you because it's Tuesday. And on Tuesday, we give the assessment. It's a system. So that overcomes any of the biases and other issues. And
Right,
that's what the science
right.
of reading is about. So I'm making things systematic that we can serve all our kids and not just the ones who have access to this or access to that or the resources in their families.
Reem, this has been an amazing conversation. You have given us so much to think about, chew on, and not only act on, but use to transform our community. I'm pledging this, we are going to take that call to transform our community, to take action. We are pledging this on Juneteenth to ensure that all of our children are reading. Because if we don't, like you said, we don't have a democracy. And I appreciate you bringing this message to us, but more importantly, caring enough that you're taking this gospel everywhere to change the narrative on how we conquer the problem. We're not the problem, we're actually the answer. And thank you.
My pleasure. I've enjoyed the conversation. And for anyone who has any doubts at all, our children are fully capable of learning. Remember, remember, our children have historically gone through any number of challenges, but they've been able to achieve, they've been able to excel. It's us. It's us. We got to get our act together. We got to support the things that need supporting, put away the things that aren't good for kids. And our kids can do this. So thank you for the opportunity and thank you for the conversation.
Thank you. And we look forward to working with you in the future. Thank you so much. And to our audience, thank you so much for joining us on Juneteenth. What a great way for us to take up this banner to not only transform our community, to take action, but ensure that every child has the rights that are due to them, particularly the right to read. Thank you from the Give Black Alliance.